Can a hot bowl of shrimp soup under a leaky roof 16 years ago save a $1.2 billion shipping empire? At 10:47 a.m. in Savannah courtroom number 4, Andre Coleman faces insults from white board members trying to steal Coleman logistics. At the height of tension, Gabrielle Coleman, the once homeless girl, now a top lawyer, walks into the courtroom. She is here to turn the tables and protect her single black father's honor. Conflict explodes when rivals accuse Andre of using her to launder money. But they do not know she holds the original trust document with a clause that automatically fires the traitors. A thrilling legal battle begins, facing dirty media and fake witnesses. To understand how that empire almost fell apart in one stormy courtroom, we need to go back 16 years. The year was 2010. Savannah's port smelled like diesel oil and rust. Andre Coleman was 29 years old. He worked as a dockside mechanic at Pier 9. He made $14.50 an hour. His wife had died the year before. He rented a small apartment for $450 a month. Most nights he came home too tired to eat. That night, a tropical storm slammed into the coast. Rain hit the streets like nails. Wind tore leaves off the old oak trees. Andre walked home from his night shift, soaked to the bone. Near the old Greyhound station, he heard a small sound. It was not the wind. It was a child crying. He stopped and looked under the broken awning. Water dripped through a hole in the tin roof. A little girl sat there, shaking. She wore a thin shirt, torn at the sleeve. Her bare feet were caked in mud. She looked about 9 years old. The smell of wet concrete mixed with diesel from the buses nearby. Somewhere down the block, a metal sign banged against a wall in the wind. Andre checked his wallet. He had $42.15 left for the whole week. If he stopped to help, he might not have gas money for his old truck. He thought about walking on. Many people already had. Cars sped past without slowing down. But her eyes stopped him. They held a kind of fear he recognized. It was the same fear he felt after losing his wife. He crouched down slowly, so he would not scare her. "You're safe now," he said softly. "Nobody's going to hurt you here." She did not answer. She just shivered harder. Andre took off his old wool scarf, the only warm thing he owned, and wrapped it around her shoulders. Then he called Child Protective Services right there in the rain. He wanted everything done the legal way, no shortcuts. While they waited for someone to arrive, Andre walked her to a small diner across the street. Fluorescent lights buzzed above cracked vinyl booths. He ordered a bowl of hot shrimp soup. It cost $6.50. It was almost all the cash he had. She held the warm bowl with both hands. Steam touched her face. The smell of shrimp and butter cut through the damp chill in the air. For the first time that night, her shoulders relaxed. She still had not said a single word. Her fingers trembled around the spoon. Andre leaned in and said the words that would shape the next 16 years. In the Coleman family, we never leave anyone standing alone in a storm. He did not know it yet, but that sentence would one day become the most powerful promise of his life. 5 years passed. It was 2015 now. Andre had legally adopted the girl, Gabrielle. She called him Dad without hesitation. With $4,217.83 in savings, Andre opened a small mechanic shop near the port. The sign above the door was hand-painted, still smelling faintly of fresh paint. Inside, tools hung neatly on a pegboard wall he had built himself. Business was slow but honest. He fixed engines. He fixed brakes. He fixed anything with moving parts. Grease stained his knuckles most days, but he never once complained. Gabrielle did her homework at a small desk in the corner, listening to the clang of wrenches and the hum of the old radio. One afternoon, a black Cadillac pulled up outside his shop. Its engine purred, expensive and quiet. A tall white man stepped out in a tailored suit. His shoes clicked hard against the pavement. This was Garrison Stone, owner of Stone Maritime, the biggest shipping company on the coast. Garrison walked in without knocking. He tossed a folder onto Andre's oil-stained desk. A gold watch flashed on his wrist as he leaned back against the counter. I want your land, Garrison said, smiling with his teeth, but not his eyes. $50,000. Take it or lose everything. Andre stared at the number. It was far below what the land was worth. This shop isn't for sale, Andre said quietly. Garrison stepped closer, invading the small space between them. He laughed, a short, ugly sound. A black mechanic doesn't get to say no to me. Not on this port. I built this with my own hands, Andre said. It stays mine. Garrison's jaw tightened. He looked around the shop like it was something dirty on his shoe. Behind a half-closed door, 14-year-old Gabrielle stood frozen, her fists curled tight at her sides. She heard every insult aimed at her father. Garrison left the folder on the desk and walked out, confident Andre would cave. That night, Andre sat alone under a flickering desk lamp. On the table sat Gabrielle's overdue school bill, $2,800. The due date circled in red ink. Fear crept into his chest. Garrison could crush his shop with one phone call to the Port Authority. He thought of all the ways Garrison could make his life harder. Broken deliveries, cancel contracts, whispered warnings to every business on the block. Andre picked up a pen. His hand hovered over the contract. Then he saw a photo on the shelf. Gabrielle, smiling, holding a school award. If he signed, he would teach his daughter that bullies always win. Andre tore the contract in half. The next morning, Garrison's lawyer arrived expecting a signature. Instead, he found torn paper on the desk. Word spread fast across the docks. A mechanic had said no to Garrison Stone. Within a week, Garrison struck back. He blocked deliveries to Andre's shop. Regular customers canceled without explanation. The shop's bank account dropped to $115. Andre sat behind his empty counter, unsure how he would pay rent. That's when an old man walked in, leaning on a wooden cane. His name was Silas, a retired dock supervisor everyone respected. His boots still carried the smell of engine grease from decades on the docks. Silas did not bring money. He carried a worn notebook, its pages soft and yellowed from years of handling. He set it down slowly, like it held something sacred. Rain still dripped from his coat onto the wooden floor. The rich men own the ships, Silas said, voice steady. But we run this port. Every crane, every crate, every hour of labor is ours. He placed the notebook on the counter. Inside were routes, contacts, and honest workers Garrison had underpaid for years. Trust the people who have nothing left to lose, Silas said. Build something they can't buy. Andre ran his fingers over the worn pages. Names, numbers, and routes filled every line in careful handwriting. Andre looked at the notebook for a long moment. Something shifted inside him. He did not need Garrison's approval to survive. He could build his own path with the very workers Garrison had ignored. A few weeks later, Andre gathered more than 40 dock workers in an abandoned warehouse at Pier 12. Rain pounded the tin roof above them. A single bare bulb swung overhead, casting shadows across tired faces. These were men, and women Stone Maritime owed back pay. Many had families to feed and nowhere else to turn. Andre stood on an old crate so everyone could see him. His voice cracked at first, then grew steady. I can't promise this will be easy, he said, but I promise it will be ours. Andre made them a simple offer. Pool their labor. Build something they all own together. A murmur spread through the crowd. Slowly, one by one, hands rose in agreement. They called it Coleman Atlantic Logistics. Their first big break came fast. Andre signed a direct loading contract with a German shipping line, bypassing Garrison's company entirely. On the first night of work, headlights cut through the rain. Security guards hired by Garrison showed up. They threatened to seize every forklift on site. Andre did not run. He stepped in front of the lead forklift, arms crossed. Rain streamed down his face. Dozens of workers lined up behind him in the pouring rain. The engine idled, growling low and heavy in the dark. Rain hissed against the hot metal hood of the forklift. Nobody moved. Nobody blinked. The guards eventually backed down and drove away. That night became the founding story of Coleman Atlantic Logistics. told for years afterward on the docks. 8 years passed. It was 2023 now. Coleman Atlantic Logistics had grown into a shipping and cold storage empire worth $1.2 billion. Thousands of port workers depended on it for steady wages, from crane operators to warehouse clerks. The company now owned 12 cold storage facilities across 3 states. Andre still walked the docks every morning, shaking hands with the same workers who had joined him from the start. Gabrielle, now 25, had graduated with honors from Harvard Law School. A family trust fund built by Andre from nothing had paid every tuition bill. She specialized in corporate law, protecting companies from hostile takeovers. Her office in Boston overlooked the harbor, a quiet reminder of where she came from. Andre kept a photo of her graduation day on his office wall, right beside the old bus station picture. Success brought new enemies. Garrison Stone, still bitter after years of losses, teamed up with a sharp-eyed investor named Sienna Montgomery. Sienna ran a private equity fund known for hostile takeovers. She dressed in gray, spoke softly, and rarely smiled. She met Andre for dinner at a quiet restaurant near the harbor, laying out charts and projected growth numbers. $200 million, Sienna said, sliding a folder across the table. Enough to double your cold storage network within 2 years. Andre studied the numbers carefully. They looked solid, almost too solid. Why us? Andre asked. There are bigger shipping companies you could fund. Sienna smiled thinly. I like a good story, Mr. Coleman. Yours happens to be very good. Andre welcomed her as a partner. He had no idea she was planting people inside his own board of directors. Slowly, some of Andre's oldest allies began to change. Sienna had paid them quietly, in large amounts, through offshore accounts nobody thought to check. One board member, a man named Frank Dobbins, had worked beside Andre since the very first warehouse meeting. He was the first to turn. They started demanding audits of Gabrielle's trust fund. They whispered accusations of money laundering and tax fraud in closed-door meetings. Andre felt the walls closing in, but he still did not know who he could trust. Every handshake now felt like a question mark. During one tense board meeting, Frank Dobbins stood and cleared his throat. Andre, we need full access to the trust records, Frank said, avoiding eye contact. For the shareholders' peace of mind. Andre studied his old friend's face. Frank, you were there the night we started this. You know exactly where every dollar comes from. Frank shifted in his seat. Times change, Andre. Numbers matter more than stories now. The room fell quiet, tension thick as the storm clouds outside. Other board members shifted papers, refusing to meet Andre's eyes. Andre realized then how far the rot had spread through his own company. At night, he reviewed old contracts alone in his office, searching for the crack Garrison had found. One gray afternoon, Andre stood in his office on the 22nd floor. Rain streaked the windows, overlooking the port he had built with his hands. Below, cranes moved like slow giants through the mist. The board, pushed by Garrison, delivered an ultimatum. They would vote to remove Andre as chairman within days. A printed letter sat on his desk, its wording cold and formal. At the same moment, news broke that Gabrielle had vanished from her apartment in Boston. Her phone sat untouched on the kitchen table, the screen still lit with an unread message. Dirty tabloids ran wild with the story. They claimed Gabrielle stole millions and abandoned her black father to face prison alone. Headlines used cruel words, hinting at old, ugly stereotypes. Andre's hands trembled reading the headlines. He did not care about his chairman's seat. He only wanted his daughter safe. He called her phone over and over. Each time, it rang and rang, then went silent. He called her old college roommate, her law firm, even the Boston police. Nobody had seen her in 3 days. He feared Garrison had done something terrible to force his hand. Sleep would not come that night, no matter how hard he tried. He paced his office until dawn, replaying every conversation he'd had with his daughter that week searching for a clue he might have missed. The night before the board's vote, Andre sat alone in the dark, holding an old photo. It showed him and 9-year-old Gabrielle outside the bus station. The frame's glass was cracked at one corner, worn from years of handling. His phone rang. The screen showed Garrison's name. "Sign over 51% of your shares for $1, Garrison said, his voice cold and calm. "Do that, and I'll make sure Gabrielle comes home safe." "Where is she?" Andre asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sign the papers," Garrison said. "Then you'll find out." Andre's chest tightened. His jaw locked tight, with rage he could not release. Veins rose along his temple as his grip crushed the phone. Everything he had built fought against everything he loved. He set a blank contract on the desk in front of him. He picked up his pen. His fingers shook as he moved it toward the paper. Outside, thunder rolled low across the harbor, rattling the old window frame. At exactly 4 in the morning, rain began falling again outside his window. A soft chime broke the silence. An email landed in his inbox from an unknown number. Inside was a 3-second audio clip. His hand shook as he pressed play. The voice was Gabrielle's, calm and sharp as steel. "Don't sign anything, Dad. Hold the port. I'm bringing justice home." Andre played it again, then a third time, just to be sure it was real. He froze, then felt strength flood back into his body. His daughter was not running. She was hunting for proof. He set the pen down and pushed the blank contract away. He tore Garrison's contract to pieces before the sun even rose. Each torn piece felt like a small victory. At 9:30 in the morning, thunder rattled the tall windows of courtroom number 4. Lightning flashed across a dark savanna sky. Old chandeliers overhead cast a pale yellow light across the wooden benches. Andre sat at the defense table, hands folded tight. His lawyer shuffled papers beside him, sweat beading on his forehead. Sienna Montgomery and Garrison Stone presented forged financial records to the judge. Their lead attorney spoke in a smooth, practiced voice, calling each fake document genuine. The papers claimed Andre had illegally moved $12 million into Gabrielle's trust fund under the label of education costs. Andre's defense lawyer had no original trust papers to fight back. Someone had stolen them from the Coleman office a week earlier, the lock forced open in the night. Reporters packed the back rows, pens scratching fast across their notepads. The judge studied the fake pages, her expression unreadable. She lifted her gavel, ready to freeze every asset Andre owned. Garrison sat smiling in the front row, already imagining himself in control of the entire port. He straightened his tie and glanced back at the cameras. "Your Honor," Garrison's lawyer said, "we simply asked the court to protect shareholders from further harm." Andre's lawyer stood, voice shaking slightly. "Your Honor, we need more time. The original documents were stolen." The judge frowned. "I can only rule on what's in front of me today." A hired witness took the stand next, a former employee paid to lie under oath. He claimed he had personally seen Andre hide funds offshore. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke, eyes darting towards Sienna for approval. Andre's lawyer tried to push back, but without the real trust papers, every objection fell flat. The judge overruled him twice in a row. Garrison leaned towards Sienna and whispered something low. She allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Outside, thunder cracked again, rattling the old glass panes above the judge's bench. At exactly 10:47 in the morning, the heavy courtroom doors flew open with a loud crack. Gabrielle Coleman walked in, calm and unshaken. She wore a sharp navy suit and carried a steel case under her arm. Her heels struck the marble floor in slow, even steps. The entire courtroom turned to stare. Whispers filled the room like static. She walked straight to the witness stand, without a single word of explanation. Garrison's smile faltered for the first time all morning. He glanced at Sienna, unease creeping across his face. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Miss Coleman, this is highly unusual." "Your Honor," Gabrielle said, "I have evidence that changes everything in this case." Gabrielle opened the steel case. Inside sat the original, sealed trust document, kept safe in a federal vault in Atlanta. "I was not hiding," she said, voice steady. "I was protecting the truth." She had spent days tracing how the fake records were created. She found the wire transfers Sienna used to bribe 2 board members, including Frank Dobbins. She had also found a witness willing to testify that Garrison ordered the theft of the original trust papers. The judge asked her to read the trust's key clause aloud. Gabrielle opened the document to a marked page. Her voice did not shake. "If any board member uses Gabrielle's race or adoption to attack Andre's control, all voting power transfers immediately to Gabrielle." Andre had written that clause years earlier, hoping he would never need it. Garrison's own words, recorded in an earlier board meeting, had done exactly that. He had mocked Gabrielle's past to justify the audit. His arrogance had triggered the very trap meant to protect his victim. The courtroom went completely silent. Even the air conditioning above seemed to pause. A clock on the wall ticked louder than it ever had before. Garrison's face turned pale. His hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. The judge reviewed the document line by line. Every seal matched. Every signature was verified by the court clerk. "This clause is valid," the judge said. "Full voting control transfers to Gabrielle Coleman, effective immediately." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks. Garrison shot up from his chair legs scraping hard against the floor. "This is impossible. I built half this port myself." "You built nothing," Gabrielle said calmly. "You only ever took." Andre watched his daughter, chest swelling with a pride words could not hold. 16 years of quiet sacrifice seemed to gather into this single moment. Federal agents, alerted earlier that morning, stepped forward from the back of the room. They had already reviewed the forged documents and bribery records. An agent approached Garrison with handcuffs ready. "Garrison Stone, you're under arrest for fraud and witness tampering." Garrison's mouth opened, but no words came out. Sweat ran down the side of his face. Sienna Montgomery tried to slip toward the exit. 2 agents blocked her path before she reached the door. "You have the right to remain silent," the agent said, cuffing her wrists. Sienna's calm mask cracked for the first time, her eyes darting around the room. The courtroom buzzed with stunned energy. The hunters had become the hunted in a single morning. Andre sat in his seat, tears welling in his eyes. He was not crying from fear anymore. He was crying for pride. Gabrielle turned to face him for the first time since walking in. She gave him a small, tired smile. "Told you I'd bring it home," she whispered. Andre stood and crossed the room to hug his daughter tightly. 16 years folded into one single embrace. He held her the way he had held her that stormy night long ago. Only now there was no fear left between them. "You scared me half to death," he said into her shoulder. "I know," she said softly. "I am sorry. It was the only way to get the proof." Photographers pushed forward, cameras flashing rapidly. Reporters shouted questions from every direction. Neither Andre nor Gabrielle answered a single one. Outside the courtroom doors, word spread fast through the halls of the courthouse. Dock workers who had come to support Andre began cheering in the corridor. Word of the ruling reached Pier 12 within the hour. Workers gathered near the old warehouse, phones in hand, watching the news play out live. Old Silas, now in his 80s, sat in a folding chair near the loading dock. When he heard the verdict, he simply nodded, as if he had expected it all along. Andre never forgot where he came from, Silas said to the workers around him. "That's why this port still belongs to us." Cheers rose up along the docks, mixing with the sound of gulls and creaking cranes. Someone rang the old bell near the loading office, a sound usually saved for the end of a long shift. By late afternoon, the storm had softened into a light drizzle over Savannah's port. Federal agents led Garrison Stone out in handcuffs past a wall of cameras. Sienna Montgomery followed close behind, head down. Andre and Gabrielle slipped quietly out a side door, avoiding the crowd of reporters entirely. They climbed into Andre's old pickup truck, the same one he drove 16 years ago. The seat still smelled faintly of motor oil and old leather. Neither spoke as they drove through the wet streets. The wipers moved slowly across the windshield, clearing thin sheets of rain. Gabrielle watched the familiar buildings pass by, each one holding a small piece of their story. "Feels strange," she said quietly, "being the one with all the power now." Andre kept his eyes on the road. Power means nothing without people to share it with. She smiled at that, resting her head briefly against the window. They pulled up outside the old Greyhound station, its awning still crooked after all these years. Andre reached into the truck and pulled out a small insulated container. Inside was a bowl of hot shrimp soup, bought from the same diner across the street. It still cost $6.50. They sat together under the broken awning, just like that stormy night long ago. The same cracks still ran along the concrete under their feet. Steam rose from the soup between them. The street was quiet except for dripping rain and the distant hum of the port. Gabrielle took the first spoonful and smiled. "Still tastes the same," she said. Andre chuckled softly, the tension of the day finally leaving his shoulders. "Something shouldn't change," he said. "Not even after $1 billion. Gabrielle leaned her head against his shoulder, just like she used to as a little girl. For a long moment, neither of them said anything at all. The rain kept falling, soft and steady. "Do you ever think about that night?" Gabrielle asked. "The one before you found me?" Andre nodded slowly. "Every year around this time, I think about how close I came to just walking past you." "But you didn't," she said. "No," Andre said, "and I never will again. Not with you. Not with anyone who needs help." They had protected an empire worth over $1 billion that day, but neither of them cared much about the money anymore. What mattered most sat quietly between them, warm and simple. A bowl of soup, a promise kept. "In the Coleman family," Andre said softly, "we never leave anyone standing alone in a storm." Gabrielle smiled, eyes glistening. "Not then. Not now. Not ever." Rain tapped gently on the old tin roof above them, the same rhythm from 16 years before. Somewhere across the port, Crane stood still against the fading light, waiting for tomorrow's work to begin again. The storm outside had passed, so had every lie built to tear them apart. Andre thought of Silas, of the 40 workers in that old warehouse, of every person who had believed in something bigger than money. Real strength, he realized, was never about the size of an empire. It was about who stood beside you when the storm came. Money could buy ships, cranes, and buildings. It could never buy loyalty or a daughter's trust or a promise kept for 16 straight years. Garrison had spent his whole life trying to buy respect. In the end, all his money could not save him from his own arrogance. Andre had spent his life giving away what little he had. In the end, that same kindness had built an empire strong enough to survive any storm. What remained was simple and unshakable. A father's promise, a daughter's loyalty, a family built on something no courtroom could ever take away. And somewhere out on that quiet street, under a roof that still leaked after all these years, a promise had finally come full circle. 16 years earlier, a broke mechanic had given away his last warm scarf to a frightened child. Now that same child had given him back his entire life's work, whole and unbroken. Neither of them needed a courtroom, a trust fund, or a single dollar to prove what mattered most. They had already proven it, one bowl of soup at a time.